Real World, a podcast series brought to you by Web3 Sanctuary. In this series, we delve into the practical applications and real world impact of Web3 technologies. Each episode features an in depth conversation with founders and executives. Today, we're joined by Kevin from Pyrpose. And we aim on bringing you firsthand insights, experiences, and stories to the forefront of the digital revolution. So today, as I mentioned, we introduce Kevin, the CEO of Pyrpose, which is a climate finance platform designed for everyday climate conscious individuals. Kevin's professional journey is rooted deeply in digital solutions, exploring how digital disruptions can lead businesses and consumers to achieve greater heights and enrich their lives. So Kevin, I'm actually going to hand over to you now quickly, actually, if you'd like to do a little bit deeper of an introduction to yourself and maybe a little bit more about your background and how you started here.
You bet. Thanks for having me. So I'm a dad. I'm an entrepreneur. I've spent most of my career doing digital marketplace stuff, like you said earlier, buyers and sellers. I actually started out in banking, surprisingly enough, but figured out the banking culture wasn't right by me. And I love building things. And so I'm originally from the US. After banking, I went into the startup space. And this is going back late 90s, Devin. And I just love the idea of where technology can enhance our lives, make things more efficient. Of course, it can also be dangerous to put into the wrong hands. And then I went on to grad school, and after grad school, I spent 10 years at Yahoo, and I feel like 10 years at Yahoo was like kind of like a PhD in internet.
Yeah.
You just saw so many different, business models and leaders and things come through in those 10 years. And it was just a great experience, and I have an incredible alumni network from it. And Yahoo's what brought us over to Switzerland 15 years ago. And then after Yahoo, it's like, how do I roll up my sleeves again and start building stuff? And so I did some more monetization of pixels and algorithms and advertising and buyers and sellers. And then I got to Pyrpose through a number of different routes, which maybe we can get into later on. But in the end, that's kind of like the background. I spend a lot of time on the weekends here in beautiful Switzerland, and delving into the world of the intersections of Web3 and climate.
Definitely. And I mean, so for our guests, one of the biggest reasons that I actually wanted to have Kevin on this particular episode is because I met Kevin through the CV Labs Batch 5 Accelerator, where we were both participating. And the biggest point of this podcast that I wanted to actually start making our viewers and students aware of was just that there are real world practical applications of blockchain technology that's currently being used for really good purposes and really good solutions. And Kevin, for me, is one of those people, and his company is one of those companies that epitomizes exactly that. So, Kevin, I want to dive into a little bit more about digital disruption and climate. And could we maybe start off by defining climate finance for those of you that maybe don't know what it is?
Yeah, really briefly, I think the United Nations probably takes credit for the term itself. In the end, it's anywhere where capital is flowing to solutions in climate. And there's two sides. There's mitigation. So mitigation is moving from fossil fuels to clean and renewable energy, right?
Mhm.
So solar panels, wind, hydro, hydrogen, et cetera. And then there's adaptation. So imagine if you lived in a community where the sea is rising, then you need to put seawalls in place. Or maybe there's floods all the time and it keeps wiping out the motorway, then you need to build bridges. So climate finance, that's what climate finance is in a nutshell.
Okay, yeah. I mean that makes a lot of sense. But you've also spoken, I guess, quite passionately about digital solutions. And how do you believe that digital solutions can actually help this climate finance industry that you just mentioned now?
Um, if it's okay, I'll go into more specifically kind of like the internet, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So for me, the internet does what it always does. I don't care what web we're in, 1, 2, 3, 4.5 in the future. I've been around long enough to see all three of them. And it breaks down the barriers that we're used to being in the place, whether that's analog And so I don't see digital disruption doing anything that it hasn't done before. It just takes on different sectors, right? So Web3 a lot is a lot about identity and knowledge and data, et cetera. And so the biggest thing to me is the first part is like awareness. So
Mm,
on the internet, we learn things that we didn't learn 20, 30 years ago super, super fast, right? So I
mm,
think, okay, number one, let's get knowledge out there. Like say, for example, in energy transition, going from fossil fuels to clean and renewable, there's a $4 trillion gap, if not higher. We have the technology. People should know that information. So there needs to be awareness. And then the next question is, okay, now you have awareness. That's kind of like what Web 1 was.
mhm,
Now it's more about like, what's the action you can take? And so to me, the digital disruption that needs to happen in climate finance is participating in climate finance. So that's how effectively, one of the many sort of angles of purpose. And that's how
mm.
we're solving for it.
I think it's quite difficult, and I mean, like the transition from Web 1 to Web 2, Web 3, kind of what all those things are, and we touched on them a lot of times, so I'm not even going to dive into that right now. But in the sense of it, Web3 specifically does touch on, I guess, every single vertical. And within that, we're finding specific niches. And I think climate finance is one of those specific niches where you don't only have to learn about, for example, like one element of it, like climate finance. You actually then have to learn Web3, and you have to learn about all of these different things, that niche, and how they can actually work together. So I was wondering that maybe if you can share an example from your career where a digital solution led to a significant positive change for either a company or its consumers, or both.
I'll use the word internet again, if that's okay. Um, so this goes back to my first startup. Actually, that's probably the best example I can think of, and that's actually what got me into the sector. And this was Web 1. This was read only type stuff, and it was a consumer health website. So this was a time where the only way you really got information about health is you went to a doctor. So you physically went there, right? Yeah, I know it sounds super crazy to you, Devin, but it did exist.
I still hate having to go to the doctor.
Right. And a lot of people do, because there's a lot of things that you can do on your own. So this was a consumer health web portal, Web 1, and I was seeing how the information that's often sat in the back of the office, or going to the office, and you had to go to the doctor's office to get there, was now coming out. And so to me, that was like a very, very powerful example of putting knowledge into the hands of a consumer so
Mm,
that they can act, let's say, in a better, more informed manner. The opposite end of that is that you get, paranoid because you read about 5 different things because your nose, is dripping or something, and you freak out. But the point being is,
the-
exactly right. Everybody became an expert on COVID at one point because of the internet. Anyway, the point being is how that knowledge, again, going back to sort of the steps, like what's the awareness, and then what's the action that happens after it. And so that's what got me into it. I was like, holy smokes, this is so powerful.
Would you say that, that specific moment as well was kind of your defining moment or realization that led you to purpose as well?
Oh gosh, no. No, not at all. Purpose, it's funny, like a lot of founders will give you this like pen drop moment. I was standing at the store and I saw this, or I was, on vacation, and this sort of thing that happened. Purpose was like a journey of different events throughout my career. Like I literally never intended to be in climate finance, like ever. It wasn't even on my dreams. Neither was living in Switzerland. But you experience certain situations. So let me get super specific about purpose. The experience I had was actually at Yahoo, and we created a Yahoo Employee Foundation. And the Yahoo Employee Foundation invested into a company doing clean, renewable energy in sub-Saharan Africa. That blew my mind. I didn't know it was a problem, number one. I didn't know about clean energy. I didn't know about distributing into off-grid communities. And so that was the first time I saw my experience and my background from doing digital marketplaces, algorithms, all the stuff I've done in digital was transferable into an area that went above and beyond just profiting the company, profiting myself, profiting shareholders, right? And so it was like a little seed, but I didn't act on it. I did join the board and I got more and more involved. And then the next level, and it wasn't quite the pin drop moment, but I was running an impact accelerator here in Geneva, where I'm based. And I was inspired by these CEOs that were starting out with a profit and purpose motive from day one, right? You see a ton of companies that have profit as the motive because that's what their job is, maximize shareholder wealth. And then I see effectively next generations coming in and saying, no, 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 we can do both.
And we can do
Right?
it differently, right?
Yeah, and we're going to do it differently. And we're going to think about that from the very beginning. And that really inspired me. And I got to learn it. And to be honest, with my banking background, even if I wasn't in banking for a long time, I was like, profit, purpose, that's oil and water. Like, these aren't supposed to go together. But I saw how it could be done. And then that was like another seed into the inspiration. And as I looked at all this, thankfully, I built up an amazing network around me here in Geneva, blending profit and purpose. And we came together and we're like, okay, you got a digital marketplace background. We've got some asset management team in the team. And then Oleg, my co-founder and CTO, he's got this incredible fintech Web3. So he's definitely the resident expert inside the business, of course. And so when you start looking at all these things and the premise of what the problem is and how Web3 can potentially solve for it, or I should use the word will solve for it, then that eventually came together. So not the most sexy story on the planet, but it's the God's honest truth of how it all came together.
But I think sometimes like a build up or a story like that, where it builds on both connections, experience, and realizing that there is actually a true problem, ends up building the stronger solutions that we're ending up starting to see now, specifically around these specific sectors.
Yeah.
But maybe maybe a little bit about Purpose, and maybe for our audience who aren't familiar, can you describe actually what Purpose offers? And I recall you used the word everyday climate conscious individual. What's that about?
All right. So for consumers, we offer an affordable, transparent, engaging platform for investing in the future of the planet, right?
This is everyday, so
Yeah,
anyone can hop
and
onto
the
it.
everyday meaning that the challenge you have today when you use the word climate finance, that's run by the climate finance elite. So really governments are doing climate finance. VCs are doing climate finance. Good for them. They should. That's fine. Institutions, and then like high net worth individuals.
Yeah.
Yet there's this massive gap of, especially here in Western Europe, that 93% of Western Europeans see the climate as a serious issue. So they're not participating in this massive energy transition from fossil fuels to clean and renewable energy. So we're bringing that consumer to the table. They're helping people, planet, and then they profit. And most people don't think you can do all three of those, right? So we've got a little bit of education to do. And then the other side of that, because it's a two-sided, right? The other side of that is the companies that get the money. So these companies are not getting an investment in them in shares. Money is being lent to them. And the reason we do that is it's a much cleaner transaction. It's lighter in terms of volume. And the everyday person on the street, whether they put 100, let's use euros, or 1,000 euros, or even 10,000 euros, seeing activity, seeing the money come through, that's exciting for them. Whereas if you put 10,000 in investment and you're waiting 7 or 10 years, like there's not going to be a whole lot of community, right? There's not going to be a whole lot of engagement. So, but if you're paying that back in 6 months or 18 months, you need to show and do it. So again, coming back to the company, the benefit to them is community, a community of people that care and believe in what they're doing, access to capital from those that care, right? And then this regenerative concept, which is becoming more and more of a thing within how businesses are built and how we're operating, and that is leave your money on the platform. So this isn't like buy it, oh, I feel good, I'm going to walk away now. No. Invest, see things improve,
See
and
how it
then
does.
see how you get to be connected to the solutions that are making like an enormous difference to people, planet.
Yeah, and I think that that connectivity between, I guess, what you're actually trying to do and helping and seeing the results of being able to actually directly interact with that is massively different from, I guess, traditional climate finance.
Yeah.
So that was actually one of my questions for you is how does Purpose differentiate itself from traditional climate finance? And I think that is one of them. But can you dive into that maybe a little bit more? What you guys?
Yeah, I think I touched on it a little bit, and the number
Yeah.
one point is access, right?
Mm.
So let's just use like a very expensive product out there, and that is being able to invest in a climate VC. You know, those are several million dollar tickets to be an LP at a climate finance. So lowering the barrier to entry is one of them. The second one is transparency of what's going on. So let's not go with those high tickets. Let's go with what people can do today. So they could go buy, let's not use the word buy. They can go invest in a climate bond or a green ETF.
How
And
many people are actually doing that? Is that quite a common thing that people are doing, or is it still like kind of, I
it's
guess, like a barrier to entry
so
even
this
that?
is a funny place. It is growing like crazy,
Okay.
but I don't know why. And here's why.
Maybe more people are just caring more.
Well,
Um,
that's, I guess we should be grateful that it is growing, and that means that, money's going to the right places. But I'll use a very specific example on an ETF.
mm,
I downloaded an ETF from a very prominent bank last week because I wanted to see all of their holdings inside this ETF. There was a company on there that does computer aided design. That's what architects use. And it was a green ETF. Why in the F is a computer aided design company part of an investment portfolio that's supporting the climate? And so then I thought, okay, maybe I'm missing something here. So I go to that company, I look at their website, nothing about climate, nothing about sustainability. So it's beyond me that these products are being sold. It's great that they're growing because that means awareness is there and people are wanting to do it. But I want to come back to your original question. I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole.
Before you leave this rabbit hole, I wanted to ask if you could maybe break down what ETF and CTF is, because a couple of people might not be like deep in the space. This is generally for like beginners, I guess, that are looking into the space.
Yeah, so these are complete automated, trading functions that sit out there with very, very low management fees. So it's not a managed solution. It's all just sitting there, very, very automated. So it is a packaging of publicly traded companies,
Mm-hmm.
and those publicly traded companies hold a certain percentage. And most ETFs will be an index of a certain theme. So when you
Mm-hmm.
say it's a green ETF, you would
Okay.
think that the green ETF is a solar panel only company or electric battery only company or wind, hydro, hydrogen. But then you go and you look at these, 50 companies inside there. And like I said, I saw this one. I was like, what in the hell's going on here? Right? Like, I don't get it.
What is this actually being used for? Like, how are they, yeah, like pushing that against their ETF?
Exactly. So in the end, so coming back to the question, the biggest part for us is transparency because we see
Mm,
that existing things are going on. So number one, access. Number two, transparency. Transparency of where the money's going, transparency of how it's being used, transparency of the change it's making to people, planet, and profit.
mm-hmm.
So here are the people that are getting the products. Here's how it changes their lives. Here's how it's reducing future carbon emissions, not something that happened in the past, right?
So this is, yeah, not, I guess, like offsetting against
Yeah,
previous
it's
things.
not going backwards, right? And then the third access point that is a differentiator for us is community. So again,
Mm,
versus traditional finance. So imagine I'll use a bank here in Switzerland. Who am I going to pick on? UBS. So I go down to UBS and I say, please give me 10,000 worth of this green bond or this ETF or something like that. money exchanges, I have it, I get a piece of paper, and then it's over. Poof. Now, do I ever find out who else has that product? Do I ever get connected to them? Do I ever
No.
get connected to the companies that are sitting inside that product? No, never. Like that would, like people would panic. But in Web3, it's all about community. So
Yeah.
if you're
Developing.
not engaging on where it's going, how it's going, and providing that opportunity for people to interact with each other and share, right? To say like, hey, you know, I was understanding this the other day about this company, and I think this is super cool. And people are talking, or being able to do like an AMA, with the CEO of one of the companies that we invest in, like, what green bond or bank is going to do that for you? Say it holds a share of Tesla, you're going to like suddenly have an AMA with Elon. No way, no way. So that's how we see what we're doing is like taking things to 2023 and beyond, and what I think should be the normal interaction for how climate finance happens.
Yeah, I used to say, and I say it actually a lot, just because that something's always been done in a specific way doesn't mean that it's the only way or the right way to do things in the future.
Yeah.
And I really love that your solution is kind of focusing on exactly that. But I mean, when building a marketplace as well, you kind of have to choose what side of the marketplace to optimize for,
Mhm.
consumers and companies. What is your priority with Purpose? By the sounds of it, it's almost like both, because you're putting quite a strong focus on transparency and community and accountability, I guess, in that sense as well, through the company side.
Yeah. You do, and this is not my first run at a marketplace. You have to pick the set of capabilities and features up front that work for both sides of your marketplace, right? So transparency is obviously one of those that allows for that to happen. Um, and the community is another one that goes on both sides. But ultimately, I think of this as more of like a supply and demand, right?
Mm,
No different than, let's say, Uber, right? The demand is the consumer, the supply are the taxi drivers. You have to balance both, but you need to figure out which one you push on first and which one you go back on. And then they kind of start feeding each other up. If you have, using the Uber analogy, no taxis, but a bunch of people that want taxis, well, you've screwed up, right? So we're going through it sort of in a stepwise approach. I will say I spend majority of my time working on the demand or the consumer,
mm,
because if you have capital, if you have community, and you have that in masses, then the deals effectively come your way. Like, think of it more like, if you're a climate VC, people know who you are. They know you have money. So a bunch of climate startups start knocking on your door, right? So we need to prove out both. Right now, the focus is optimizing for scale of users, but then there will be a transition where we need to optimize for scale of capital. And we have
mm.
phases that we're going to go through to get there. And it does need to be sort of a stepwise, like, okay, get to this point, now push this one up, now push this one up. I mean, I remember the first versions of Uber, and it's not that I think we're the next Uber. Maybe we could be the next Uber of climate finance or something. Anyway, um, like there was like one thing to do, and it was a taxi. That was it.
Mhm.
There was no Uber X. There wasn't this planning. There wasn't all the different things you can do on Uber now. And there's Uber for business. And so the point being is you start out proving it, and it's like the nucleus of your solution. Once you get there, you can expand to different types of options. And so we're just proving this out within our beta amongst a select group of people, again, focusing on getting that consumer a seat at the table when it comes to climate finance.
Yeah, and you've actually just opened your beta, haven't you? How's it going? What are some of the things that you're learning through your beta at the moment?
Yeah, so the betas, we're a few weeks in, and betas are, it's funny having lived through a few of them. You think what's going to happen, and you cross your T's and dot your I's, and the same sort of things always happen. You know, there's bugs that you're like, ah, I thought that might happen. It's going well, and the beta though, it really taught us a lot of different things already. And we went into this thinking that the climate conscious consumer in Western Europe is Gen Z and millennial only, for example, because you know you read the headlines and you know you're striking for climate, you're striking in schools, you're doing this, and so you're like, wow, you know, Gen Zs are all in, and millennials, and they absolutely are, but there's also Gen X, boomers, and older that are interacting with our platform, and we're pretty blown away by that.
Yeah, that's
Um,
actually really interesting for me as well, because I mean, like most of the people that we're seeing actually with our platform are between the ages of 18 and 35, maybe. Um,
mhm.
so I guess like trying to do that education and onboarding, not just into then climate finance, but also into, I guess, an actual open beta platform using blockchain technology creates an additional layer of complexity.
Well, and that's part of the reason we only went live a few weeks back is we found out that the climate. So let's think of these as like circles. So like you have how many climate conscious consumers in Western Europe, and then you have like how many Web3 users. And unfortunately, the circles are really that big difference. And then you
Mm,
say, okay, what's that overlap between these groups so that we can bring something that looks, behaves, acts like Web3, but speaks to the climate conscious consumer.
yeah,
And we really had to do a lot of technical changes and partnerships to
interesting.
get the Web3 experience to be super, super seamless. Uh,
Mm,
because when we sat down with users and showed them our solution and we gave them a quasi Web3, not like full MetaMask Web3, but like, you know, it was like panic. It was like an allergic reaction. So I think, you know, going back to some of the lessons and the point of your question, like the climate conscious consumer is much broader than we thought. B, we really needed to make sure that we were using Web3 in a manner that provided comfort and ease of use so that the climate conscious consumer would be willing to part with their money,
mm,
um, and you know put down and go from fiat to crypto. And then the last point from the beta that has been a lesson learned is people see our solution as almost that like they what's the word I would use? They don't struggle with it, but they really find it almost difficult to believe that you can help people and planet and make a return. Like they feel like something's not in there. They're
yeah.
like, what's going on? So we need to do better. So this isn't a highlight. This is actually a low light. And the low light is we need to do better at storytelling because we're so close to the solution. We're so close to how it works that we need to be better about explaining this is how it is exactly going. This is why we're doing what we're doing. And this is where on the planet that it makes the most immense difference and bringing people through that educational process in a way that speaks to them but doesn't require them to read like a you know a 20-page PDF on it, right? You know, there's a lot of other lessons inside there, but I would say those are the things that would pop to my mind when I think about how it's going.
Yeah, I mean, I think the learning curve is probably only just starting as well. And I think that's always the case with this. And it's really impressive and inspiring to actually see you putting so much time and effort into both communication and into making sure that the story is told correctly, because I think that is incredibly difficult to get right, especially across multiple age groups and generations,
Mm-hmm.
when your solution is actually benefiting the planet and your users.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Thanks.
but so maybe diving into a little bit more about Web3 and climate solutions. We've actually recently spoken on a panel in Switzerland at the CV Lab Summit about that Web3 unlocks potential for climate solutions in unprecedented ways. So maybe you can share with our viewers a little bit more about what your thoughts were there, and maybe some of the contributions that we actually discussed on that panel, because I thought that they were incredibly interesting and could also actually benefit. We could hear a little bit more about them.
All right. So remember, climate finance is any money going, adaptation, mitigation. We're about mitigation. So we're not building bridges. We're not putting up seawalls. We're transitioning from fossil fuels to clean and renewable energy. Our focus is on sub-Saharan Africa. And in sub-Saharan Africa, it's often a very challenging place to get money to. It's expensive, the transaction to get there. There's people all sort of like along the way that will take their fee. Then once it gets there, if you're not on the ground, you need some validation and some trust as to where it's going. You need to be able to know that, hey, if this good scenario happens, then this is what happens with my money. If this bad scenario happens, this happens with my money. So when we were diagnosing where do we need to put capital and how do we go about doing it, Web3 was just like a no-brainer, right? You're able to transact in an efficient, transparent way. You're able to be transparent about what's going on, and you're able to build trust. And part of that trust is giving the programmability of the solution in control of the user. Of course, we provide the guardrails into it, but the point being is that programmability, a smart contract gives people ease of mind and comfort. The other part of it is the currency fluctuation risk, right? So going from Europe that's relatively stable on currencies to sub-Saharan Africa that can have some pretty large fluctuations.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, you can account for that, and you can build that sort of trust layer so that people feel confident in where things are going. And the second layer I would say to this, which is in Western markets, let's use developed markets, not Western. And developed markets, we have a lot of our baseline needs met, right? Food, safety, shelter. So when we go to technology, we're trying to aspire for something, right? We're trying to create wealth. We're trying to create entertainment. We're trying to create efficiencies. And when I see all the solutions that I come across in Web3, and Devin, you're way closer to this than I am, that are in developing markets or sub-Saharan Africa, it's out of necessity, right? It's looking at things that I take for absolute granted in one of the wealthiest nations in the world, Switzerland, that the infrastructure layer is there, the trust layer is there, the verification is there, and you feel like, okay, I don't need to think about those things. But I feel like it's the same thing when it gets into climate finance. Like, we need to provide all those trust layers, but it's also because out of necessity, Kenya is a huge adopter, as is Nigeria. I don't know the ranking of it all across sub-Saharan Africa, but it's huge, right? Because of necessity.
Yeah, very much so. I was actually reading an article. I was seeing if it's in my tab somewhere here about it, actually. So, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, and Tanzania all have some of the highest grassroots adoption levels in the world right now, according to the Global Crypto Adoption Index, I think. So there are definitely a lot of people in sub-Saharan Africa working on these impeccable solutions because there is a necessity for it, and we don't have an existing system in place. Countries like Switzerland and like a lot of countries in Europe and the States, they already have existing systems to do a lot of things. So they would, I guess, rather focus their efforts and their intentions on either improving existing systems rather than for us. So I'm sitting in South Africa at the moment. We're building entirely new solutions with very unique ideas to basically leapfrog anything that you guys might already have.
That's what's fun about what's fun to see some of the technological advances that happen in developing markets. I mean, M-Pesa and Kenya, like, come on, that's been around for a long time.
It has,
Digital
yeah.
payments on a feature phone, right? Not even a smartphone, and out of necessity, right?
Yeah.
So it's and then actually with the stuff we're doing, it's interesting to see as well. Solar, which has been around for a super long time, is taking individuals who are in off-grid communities 5 rings up the energy ladder, right? So like the baseline is where they're at right now. So they're using wood, charcoal, etc. for energy and light. You go one layer up from that, you've got some kerosene. Okay, now you've got electricity, but is the electricity clean? Is it safe? Is it coming from a generator? All these different things. And so
Mm.
you're just like leapfrogging folks from where they were before. And, like my home here in Switzerland, developed, safe, clean, wealthy, don't have solar. But
Yeah.
now, that's becoming a pop people through something super quick.
It's actually solar is actually a really hot topic here in South Africa at the moment. I'm not sure if you're aware, but we have a few issues with our electricity. So solar is very quickly becoming an alternative solution. And I'm actually chatting with Aaron from Moment and Suncash. I think you might have met him at the conference as
Yep,
well,
great guy. Love what he's doing.
on exactly that solution around solar energy reliefs. Um, but I'm curious, actually, Kev, having chatted, I guess, through all of these potential uses, where do you actually see the intersection of Web3 and climate finance heading in the next 5 years?
Um, there's a couple things that I think need to happen, and that is really an industry maturity. And when I say industry maturity, I don't mean climate finance, but I mean Web3
Mm,
making its way into climate finance. Because I think that you and I both know, like the last, 18, 24 months or so, let's say 18 in Web3 haven't had the best PR. Let's use that word, right?
that's a very polite way of putting it.
The politically correct answer. And so I think that Web3 as a community owes it to itself to provide more and more real world opportunities like your podcast here, right? So I think seeing how things aren't happening inside just this sort of like Web3 bubble with Web3 acronyms that scare people off, right?
Exactly. And there's so many of them as well. It's almost unapproachable. It's completely unapproachable for a lot of people.
Exactly. So I think looking out, the main thing should be that Web3 isn't looked at as this solution that's only being built by Web3 natives, and that a lot of people come into it curious about the potential. They read the original, white papers on things and go, okay, this is about user control. This is about data transparency. This is about community. This is about removing a bunch of middlemen that are making things complicated and hard for us. Yes, there
Mm,
were grifters. Yes, there were rug pulls. Fine. Guess what? Web 1 had them, so did Web 2.
yeah.
And you know how many, financial fraud cases have happened in traditional finance in the last 10 years versus, or let's not lose last 10 years. Let's just use the last 4 or 5 years versus what's happened in Web 3. I don't know the answer, but I can tell you it's got to be 10 times bigger than what's happened in Web 3. So I
Mm,
think getting back to your question, when you look out 5 years from now, specifically in climate finance, what we should be aiming for is that, I don't know, a quarter, maybe 30% of all climate finance is decentralized, or as some people call the sector regenerative finance, right? Whatever it may be, that you see an adaptation not just by Web3 natives, but the climate conscious as a retailer. So that would be obviously us being successful and other companies. But also you're seeing institutions and governments, and then the companies themselves leveraging Web3 for as much as what it's designed to be and what it should be doing.
Yeah. And how, just for I guess like anyone that's watching or wants or is watches the recorded later, how can individuals actually get involved in purpose and in your mission and helping climate finance or helping this as a discussion and grow themselves, either their knowledge base or actually getting involved in your project?
Well, one, I would say, go to pyrpose.io, pyrpose.io.
Drop it in the comments for you guys.
Yeah, try it out. We are in beta, so be easy on us. We're aware of many of our challenges, but you can easily link out to me, and I'm happy to take your feedback on. And I would say the other thing to tell anybody that's looking at climate and climate finance is start by understanding what you care about. Start by understanding what part of the climate space you're interested in. And then you can come to Pyrpose and you can see how does that align with your own outlook of the world. And if we align with your outlook of the world, then we're happy to have you on our journey and be one of our early users. I think that the thing that people have to understand is that it's early days in climate finance for the climate conscious consumer. And we're going to be making steps along the way to enhance that experience. It's interesting. I thought when we launched our product, the knowledge of climate, that like a climate conscious consumer knew everything that was going on. That's absolutely not the case. I'm like a self-proclaimed climate nerd. I just keep reading about it, and I really can't stop getting in front of it. And our users so far have kind of fallen into two categories. One is like, I need to know what I'm doing to impact the planet. Like, how am I doing stuff? So we have a carbon quiz for that. It's super brief. It's directional. It's not 100% accurate. That would take about 150 questions. And then there are others that I call like the climate, like climate for the people, and they recognize exactly how our solution impacts people's lives. And in the end, we're a social being, right? So you can say to somebody, hey, you're going to reduce 25 metric tons in the future. People can't see that. They can't visualize that.
Yeah.
Say, by reducing 25 metric tons in the future, you're changing people's lives. It becomes a very different conversation.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Because it's more tangible.
It becomes tangible. And like I said, we like helping each other out. We're, citizens of this planet. And if you now have access to do that, that's the aim that we want to deliver on. But like I said to you earlier, be patient with us. We're in beta.
Yes, that's a really important thing to note as well. I mean, like being in beta, it's almost like as a startup founder or as a founder of any company going into beta and actually opening up your heart into what you've built. Like this is something I care so much about, and I'm presenting it to you for feedback because at the end of the day, it's about what the user wants as well. So being able to take that feedback in can sometimes be a bit intense, but we actually have a great community behind us, and I'm sure your beta testers as well will take the time to give honest feedback and be kind.
Absolutely. It's tough though, right? You put your baby out there and your users are like, oh, your baby sucks. I don't like this. And you're like, oh, damn it. Damn it. I thought it was so cool.
Right? I'm sure it is really cool. I'll go play around on the beta as well, I think actually after this call. But what other upcoming projects or initiatives are you most excited about with Pyrpose?
There's one, and this came out of the beta from feedback from users, and that is this. We call it like the multiplier effect. We have a different name inside the business. Whenever you launch a product in the tech space, you got to give it some funny name, right?
Multiplier effect.
But I'll give you multiplier effect for now, and that is People buy what other people buy, right?
It's a signal, right?
It's a signaling. Someone could call it virtue signaling. Some can call it, I want to fit in. But you think about your own network and how you get referred to somebody else. Well, that's like a pre-vetting, right? And the same thing happens with products. And we, oddly enough, didn't think about this at the very beginning. And that is when you invest on purpose, when you put your money on the business, that feeling you get, that connection to real tangible solutions, that gets people excited, and they want to talk about that. So they want to tell their friends, they want to tell their family, maybe they want to put it out, um, on social media or something like that. I've personally never made an investment and, gone to Twitter and Insta and said, hey, everybody, you should too. But our our solution's so much different, right? It's
Yeah,
not
I think
just,
it's different with climate.
yeah, it's different with climate, but I think it's also coming back to that element there. So the thing I'm excited about is how we build a solution that's very easy to allow those that are interested in sharing with friends and family to join Purpose and come on board and be part of this journey with us. Because there's nothing worse than like getting spammy, hey, I did this and you should too. Like it's no tiered, follow me or whatever, but yet at the same time, we really do want to be community first. And if
Yeah.
you're not coming on with this idea of, hey, I want to be social about this, I want to engage with others here, I want to engage with the companies, then maybe Purpose isn't the right platform for you. And you should go buy one of those green ETFs with that stupid AutoCAD company in there, right? But if you are community first and you care about climate and you want to connect to those like-minded individuals, we need to provide that experience that makes you want to do that. And so I'm excited about the developments we're doing in that. I'm thinking we'll have like a pretty early version of that in about a week or so.
That's really exciting. What is it? Multiplier effect.
I'm calling it
Multiplier.
multiplier effect, but that's not what we call it. So I'll
Okay.
wait for us. I'll wait for us to figure out the name we give it.
Um, you're talking, I guess, like a lot about like if this is what you want to do, then this might be the right solution for you. If not, you very much need to kind of, I guess, find what works for you. If you could give one piece of advice to your consumers, or any businesses maybe that are interested in it as well, about their role in climate finance, what would it be?
I'll make my consumer one pretty brief because I think I sort of touched on this
Yeah.
already. But at a very big picture, like have faith in humanity. Like don't get caught up in the governments aren't doing their part and like da 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 da. Like yes, the climate crisis is a giant coordination f up. Fine. Okay, now what do we do? How do we organize? That was a weird word. How do we organize in a way that speaks to community and speaks to the things that you care about? So I think that you need to maintain a positive outlook and then figure out how to get involved in climate finance and find if our solution isn't right by you, that's okay. Of course, I love the more the merrier, but it's more get into the solution, get informed, find what you like. Then for businesses, oh my gosh. Uh,
I feel like that's like a whole
yeah,
new.
let me be as politically correct as I can on this one. When I say businesses, I think of corporates, not the companies that would come on our platforms. Like we're always happy to talk to good climate SMEs, proven solutions in sub-Saharan Africa all day long. And we've got a backlog of them, and we're only working with a few right now. But if you want to talk about like what I call corporate America, like corporate America needs to wake the F up because there's very few of them that have done what's called science-based targets. And that
Mm,
means, hey, by 2030, I, as a company and CEO of this company, have a target to reduce the company's carbon footprint by X amount. And X amount of that's going to come from my operations. And this small part over here, I'm going to offset with carbon credits. So few have committed to doing that. And I think that what's going to happen is that their employees are going to say, what the heck's going on here? Our competitors doing it. I think their customers are going to say, we're not buying your products because you haven't done something to put on the planet. Okay, fine, you didn't know this when the company was created 50 years ago or 20 years ago that you were destroying the planet, but now you do, so do something about it. I think investors will start to shed the shares. And then I think ultimately one of these startups that I'm working around, it won't be me, because I'm around like climate startups all the time, they're going to go and eat their lunch, right? They're going to gobble them up, and the corporates have so much potential to provide another layer of value back to their stakeholder group if they would just think more beyond their quarterly profits, more beyond their personal paychecks and bonuses. Profit is a motivator, and it should be, and our platform is based on that as well. We get that. But I think you need to wake up at a corporation, recognize where the tides are going, and basically either evolve or die.
Yeah, I think so. I think so too. And I think it's going to become a lot more prominent in the next few years. The topic's already getting a lot more serious, and a lot more wider attention as well across the globe.
Of course, of
Um,
course.
but Kevin, I wanted to ask if you could maybe leave us with some of your last thoughts or advice or things that you're excited about, or just, I guess, like maybe a little bit more information about you or something that you'd like to share us with to close off the session.
You've heard enough about me today. My advice, let's go specific to your area, which is, Web3 for the real world. If you're sitting on the sidelines, you've been watching Web3, go read some of the early papers. Go read and understand why this market and these tech solutions were created. Understand that. The core devs are doing that. The core organizations are doing that. So if you're looking to get in, look at us as an example where real world does meet Web3. And then go look at how many others are out there and providing solutions out there. And then I think if you're a skeptic on Web3, you'll soon not become a skeptic. And I think it will take it's going to take some time, right? It's going to take a bit more of real world examples happening. The one I love is called, well, I love a lot of them, but one of them in particular I like is called Goldfinch.
Goldfinch.
Goldfinch has pushed about 100 million around the world, purely on chain, going to SMEs, going to climate companies, going to people in need as loans. It's a similar story to how we're operating, but purely Web3 based. But yet
Amazing.
it's provided so much value, right? So just start looking at sort of like real world benefits, and look to us and folks like we're doing, and look at what Devin and the team are doing. There's a lot of potential there.
Thanks so much, Kev. I think a lot of the time, and I mean, the reason that I wanted to just call this real world applications of Web3 or Web3 in the real world is because I think for a lot of new users as well, it's such an intangible term. It's impossible to kind of, I guess, like see how blockchain is taught and try and imagine how it's actually then goes through the ethosphere or this imaginary internet and becomes something that's actually being used and impacting people in today's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we said earlier, like sub-Saharan Africa, as well as like any developing market, there's an absolute necessity to fix a lot of things that Web3 can solve for.
Very much so. And in that sense, Web3 in the real world is your gateway to understanding how decentralized technologies are making a tangible impact in our world today. And as we've been exploring these successes and this very, very interesting session with Kevin, thank you so much for coming through and participating in this. I feel like I've learned a lot, and understanding the innovative ways in which Web3 is being applied to create a more transparent and efficient and inclusive global ecosystem, specifically through climate finance, has been, for me, very, very interesting.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for joining us. And
My
thank you
pleasure.
to Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks so much for everyone as well for joining. We're aiming to be more than a podcast. We're aiming to be a community of forward thinkers, change makers, and believers in the power of this technology to create a positive change in the world. So if you would like to carry on watching our series, please subscribe and tune in and be a part of this conversation, shaping the future of both the internet and the world with us. And Kevin, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Cool.